Welcome to the Mental Health Multiverse.
We're your hosts,
HB
and LB. If you're also on a healing journey and enjoy pop culture, stick around.
Hello everyone, HB here. Since recording our Captain Hook episode, we've lost yet another legend. For those who don't know, she played Wendy in the live-action Hook adaptation of Peter Pan. And although we only briefly mention her once in this discussion, we want to dedicate this episode to Dame Maggie Smith and her legacy. Rest peacefully.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of MHM. Today, we are talking about the notorious Captain Hook and whether or not he is the villain of the movie or if Peter Pan is. And helping us break down that discussion is an amazing guest. So, HB, introduce our guest today.
Okay, everybody, we've had them on the podcast before. You've been begging for them to come back. It is none other than Abelle from our Hunchback of Notre Dame episode, and we are very, very happy to have her back here on the podcast. Many, many things have changed since we last recorded because Abelle is now a voice actor, which is very fun, or is on a journey. So a general nerd, a horror fan, a voice actor, and a person who has a lot of opinions about a lot of things. So that's why they're here. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me back. This is super exciting, especially now that I have a much better microphone this time. But yeah,
absolutely.
Setup is brilliant. Yeah.
It's for those not watching the video, like you got the egg crate looking foam, got the lights, did you build your own?
Yes, and it was once upon a time a closet, and now it is a closet with no clothes in it and a bunch of acoustic foam and some LED lights and some sound blankets and a me. So yeah.
Nice.
And
yeah.
a microphone. Yeah.
Looks very professional. Having talked to you before, I have no doubts that we're gonna hear you one day somewhere. I'm gonna be like, I know them. I talked to them before they were famous.
Thank you.
They were on our podcast.
They were on our podcast.
Yes, I knew them first.
Yes, exactly. But yeah, like I mentioned, we are here to talk about Captain Hook and the various iterations and adaptions that have come out since I think the original play. What is all this based on?
A play first, and then a book, but then the play was published, and then there's a lot. Yeah, it's like the person who wrote the book. What the person's name is? John. Something. James and Barrie, Barrie,
yeah,
J.M. Barrie, and so it was a book. I mean, no, it was. It's a lot. There's a lot. So in 1904, it was a play called Peter Pan or the Boy Who Wouldn't Grow Up, and then developed later. The same author / playwright developed it into a book called Peter and Wendy, a novel. And then in 1928, Peter Pan or the Boy Who Wouldn't Grow Up was published. So there you go.
Interesting.
I think we can lump all those things together as the origin story. Just those three things. The play, the novel, and then the publication of the play.
That's so wild to me that the play was created, thought up in 1904, which is casually over 100 years ago at this point. And it makes me wonder like what may have or is coming out soon or is already out that in 100 years will have such a legacy. That's so wild. That's crazy.
Wild. Yeah, that's wild.
That's crazy.
It's wild to think about. And Peter Pan has had so many adaptations. I'll get into all of them. I won't get into it right now, but there's just a lot. Like there's the Wikipedia page for it just goes on and on. Films, TV shows, books, like spin-off novels, spin-off shows, spin-off, like there's so much.
Yeah.
There's so much.
Abelle, how would you describe Captain Hook?
He's definitely one of Disney's more flamboyant villains in many ways. He's definitely He and Smee both are definitely very queer-coded in a variety of ways, and like at the very least, both in the original animated movie and in Hook, which I think we're gonna get into a little bit as well. But yeah, definitely in the original animated movie, he's like one of the more effeminate characters. He's like, he and Smee touch each other a lot, just in ways that like you don't see other like heterosexually coded or just blatantly heterosexual characters touch each other. Even like if you look at the rest of the crew on Captain Hook's ship, every other member of his crew almost is more like traditionally masculine than he is, like just in build and like facial hair and all of that. But he's also just kind of a lot of fun because like, yeah, he is queer coded as a villain, which is a questionable thing and has like some not great origins, obviously. But he's dramatic, he's fun, he's kind of just like incredibly extra. And especially like when you look at Hook in particular, he's basically almost a drag queen. Like Dustin Hoffman plays him as just like a catty queen is really what he is that entire movie. But yeah, that's kind of him in a nutshell, I think.
Makes sense.
I love that, and I love that you brought up the queer coded thing too. I think that's one of the reasons actually that we asked you on for our villains season, because I know that you have a lot of opinions about villains being queer coded. And so we'll get into that a little bit more later. But I also I didn't get to watch Hook. So I normally for the purposes of this podcast, we look at the characters through the lens of a specific film. And so today we'll be looking at Captain Hook specifically through the lens of the 1953 Peter Pan Disney animated film, but also through that 1991 Hook. So Abelle, you're gonna kind of you'll be the foundation for talking about that. Can you tell us, because neither LB nor myself have seen Hook in a very long time.
Gotcha.
So,
cool.
Yeah.
So can you do us a favor and just give us a little sort of synopsis? I mean, people know the story of Peter Pan, right? A little baby synopsis of Peter Pan, and maybe a synopsis of Hook as well.
Yeah, so Peter Pan, the original animated version, from what I understand, it follows the original novel and play plotline very closely. Pretty much there's these couple of kids who meet this boy named Peter Pan who says he comes from Neverland, where he never grew up and he can fly because he has a friend who's a little fairy. And so he and the kids fly back to Neverland via the magic of fairy dust, and they have some adventures. And there's an evil pirate captain named Captain Hook who wants to kill Peter for reasons I literally just watched this earlier today, and I can't remember just now if there's ever specific reasons why Captain Hook, he wants to not just capture Peter, he like straight up wants to kill this kid. This was a thing I did not remember until I watched earlier today. You know how like some of the earlier Disney movies can go like a little bit harder, you might say, than they go now? Like there's a scene where literally Captain Hook almost like hooks Peter to death multiple times. And then they have a sword fight at the very end. So again, like actual threat of death. But eventually they defeat Captain Hook. All the kids are saved. The kids who need to go back home goes back home. You never see Captain Hook actually die, but like he's being chased off into the distance by this crocodile that he's deathly afraid of because it's the crocodile that took his hand off, leaving him with just a hook for a hand. And that's pretty much...
Can I interrupt you?
Yes.
It's so... From what I remember, didn't Peter Pan cut off Hook's hand and feed it to the crocodile?
That's it. That's why Captain Hook is mad at him. There we go.
Yeah.
Correct. Yes, so there's that. But yeah, that's basically the animated movie in a nutshell. Everyone has a happy ending, aside from Captain Hook, obviously. And then Hook is a live-action movie directed by Steven Spielberg that's basically like a sequel to Peter Pan, where the idea is eventually Peter Pan came back to the real world and left Neverland and grew up into like an investment banker type dude played by Robin Williams. And somehow Captain Hook comes and takes his two children back to Neverland, and Peter has to go back there as well and kind of rediscover his childhood and his childlike sense of wonder, and just like not being an investment banker is basically what he has to learn to do. And he has to save his kids, and he eventually does that. Captain Hook is defeated for real seemingly this time, because he definitely just like completely vanishes again via the crocodile that took his hand in the first place. And everyone goes home and happy ending. Woo. The end.
Nice.
To me, just based on that description, I'm like, it kind of, this could be like Peter Pan sort of interpreted as like a fever dream. Like Neverland was like a fever dream.
It really
that
kind of
had.
is, because it kind of, it seems like, because I can't remember her name right now, but basically in
Wendy?
Hook, yes, she's already an adult and has a grandchild when Peter Pan decides to rejoin the real world. So Wendy is like his grandmother, and so she
that Maggie
remembers.
Smith?
Yes,
Her?
that's who it is. Yes, I could not remember her name. And I guess like Peter Pan had like totally forgotten everything about his past. He was like, I was just a crazy kid, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And Maggie Smith has to be like, no, that is who you are. You are Peter Pan. That was not a fever dream that you had when you were a child. Just FYI.
Wild. Hook sounds like a good time. It's been too long for me since I've seen it to actually remember anything about it, though.
It's super fun. It's one of those movies where I just saw it a lot during my childhood and was just something I always enjoyed, so I saw it a lot. Also, the whole Lost Boys sequences, especially with Dante Bosco playing Rufio, are just a delight.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
Yeah. I was thinking, too, that, like, the Hook kind of is like a Disney twisted tale, if you think about it. Or to put it in Marvel terms, it's like a what if, right?
Yeah.
What if Peter Pan decided to grow up? But between us, do you think that Peter Pan would ever actually make that choice?
To actually like become an adult and leave Neverland? Based on, if we're going solely by the Peter we see in the animated movie, absolutely not. That boy never grows up. He never leaves. He stays obnoxious for his entire existence.
He is a teenage boy for eternity.
Yes. No. Yeah, that boy does not make that choice.
We have thoughts and feelings about Peter Pan because, okay, so we have discussed, right, like that Peter chops off Hook's hand and feeds
it to a crocodile.
Why does he do that? Well, I know that they have this like long-standing feud, but why? Did they ever explain it?
Not that I can recall in the movie, at least. It was just he is a pirate and they were fighting and he cut off his hand and fed it to a crocodile. The end. I left him with trauma.
Yeah.
You Googled it?
I Googled it, and apparently it's because the Lost Boys dared him to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Look,
Peter Pan is the villain. I'm sure.
Look, as someone who recently just suffered some hand trauma as well, if a child cuts off my hand and feeds it to a large apex predator, we're gonna have beef. So I understand.
You're gonna throw hands. Well, hands.
Yes, I will throw the hand I have left.
We'll throw the one
child.
hand. Yeah. Yeah.
So, in terms of motivation, then Captain Hook.
That seems fair. That seems fair, to be frank.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I would say so. Do you think, okay, but he is technically the quote unquote villain. Is he justified in his desire to kill
a child?
Technically a child?
Yeah, because like, this raises the question, how old is Peter Pan? Because he looks like a child. Is he like
and
hundreds
how long?
of years old?
Is this like
point?
an Edward Cullen situation?
Exactly.
Like, how long have you been 17?
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah, there's definitely just some fairy tale morality where you're like, you know what? Sure, the adult and the children are just as morally responsible. That's the level we're operating on, I guess.
Well, have you all seen the meme? Well, I don't even know if it's a meme. I saw it on the internet somewhere where it's basically saying that kids see Captain Hook as the villain, but adults empathize with him because we would want to kill Peter Pan too.
Yes, because I had that exact thought watching that movie today for the first time in probably 15 years, and I was like, you know, I don't know if I remember Peter Pan being this obnoxious before, But
Well,
but Captain Hook is right? Question mark.
yeah. We talked about this a lot, I think, in the is it the Other Strong Ladies episode where we
Mm-hmm.
talk about
Mm-hmm.
Tinkerbell and Wendy and
Mm.
how poorly Peter Pan treats them. We didn't
Mm-hmm.
even touch on Hook in that
Yes.
episode, but Peter Pan treats Wendy and Tinkerbell both very poorly.
Yep. And then the only other female I think anyone interacts with in the movie is Tiger Lily, who is immediately a sexual object for Peter Pan. These are the three women in the entire movie.
Does not pass the Bechdel test.
No. No.
Absolutely not.
No. That was honestly
Oh.
another reason I was like, maybe Captain Hook isn't wrong here. Because, like, this kid is maybe, like, a little bit of a little shit. I'm just saying, not advocating for child murder here. I'm just saying maybe Peter Pan needs some boundaries healthily, strongly enforced with him.
Yeah, like it's not very much good versus evil, hero versus villain. It's poor guy with clearly PTSD
Yeah.
trying to heal in, not a great way because revenge is not always what it's cracked up to be. But yeah, Peter Pan is not a hero. He's not someone to be idolized, which actually reminds me, I don't know if you guys ever watched Once Upon a Time.
A little bit years and years ago, but it's been
Okay.
a while.
Are you familiar with what it is,
Mhm.
HB?
I am, yeah.
Oh, okay. In that iteration, when they go into the whole Peter Pan thing, he's the bad guy. Spoiler, sorry. And Hook is kind of the good guy. Also, he is gorgeous. Anyway, that's beside the point. That whole show is just one big cluster and it's very convoluted. And I was hooked for for like 5 seasons, and then it got too much. But anyway, all of that to say, it feels like should any modern day Peter Pan versus Captain Hook movie come out, I feel like it would be very much that Peter Pan is he's the antagonist.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I think
I have seen like in my research for this episode a lot of questions that came up, like how you Google something and then more questions come up. A lot of the questions that came up had to do with like in which adaptations is Hook considered the hero or the good guy, or maybe somewhere more moderate, like not good or bad, just there.
Yeah, it honestly makes me think a bit of watching SpongeBob again as an adult and siding with Squidward a little bit too much, maybe.
is this part of growing up?
Yes, it's like, oh, I understand this character now.
Like, yeah, as kids, we just thought Squidward and I guess Hook and all of these other villains are buzzkills. And then we get older and we're like, no, they're just trying to protect their sanity.
Yes. Like,
from
I just want
very
to take a
annoying
nap.
people. Yeah.
Yes. I just want to take a nap. I don't want to deal with the gang of neighborhood kids who are like throwing rocks at my fence. I just want to be left alone.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Abel, you mentioned that you grew up watching Peter Pan, watching Hook a lot. HB, what were kind of your experiences with this character, I guess?
I don't have a lot of experience with Captain Hook, I would say. Like Peter Pan for me wasn't really heavily in my personal rotation.
Mm.
I do have visceral memories of the ticking clock of the crocodile and the ticking clock though. And like the sound is there a song with it? Or is it just like or does it just tick?
I feel like it's a very like rhythmic in time with the ticking, but
Yes,
I don't remember any
now.
tune specifically.
Yeah, I have like visceral memories of that. And I think that speaks to the animation and what they did with that, because it's very like iconic. Just like we were talking about it in our Cruella episode about like Cruella has the iconic look. Like Captain Hook has a lot of iconic signature things that make him who he is too. And so I guess that's my experience with the character. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm in the same boat. Peter Pan, not very much in my rotation as like a movie I watched a lot, but I do remember when I was a kid and I went to Disneyland, and during the parade there was a Hook costume and the head was just gigantic and it kind of scared me because it's like
same.
I mean, he's not like in the animated version, he's not a great looking guy, and he has like, I don't know, anyway, and so to have that like on a caricature level, blown up, it's massive. And then he's like right in your face saying hi as he's walking by. And as a small child, I was like, stay away, please. Don't
That's
kill
so
me.
Funny. I literally had the exact same experience as a child going to Disney World where I was afraid of, I remember being like pushed around in a stroller and seeing the giant Captain Hook character costume dude and immediately being terrified because Captain Hook was a villain and he had a hook hand. And I was just like, no. But yeah, same.
Yeah. Yeah. Hook hand. So speaking of Captain Hook being queer coded, another angle that we might dabble in a little bit is kind of the disability trope when it comes to
also that.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on that? And I just want to say too, like, I know you say you're a person with a lot of opinions, but I having talked to you and having, followed you now on Instagram for a while, they're very educated opinions. Like, you don't have an opinion just to have an opinion. Like, you do a lot of research it's very educated, and I just really appreciate that. So
thank you.
Anyway, throwing that out there.
I try because I have a lot of feelings about it when I see people not do that, so I try to at least hold myself to the same standard. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank God. Yeah, obviously the animated movie and Hook are taking from the original story where Captain Hook is disabled and is missing a hand. And that definitely just ties into like who knows how long the trope has existed for of just disability or disfigurement as being indicative of like someone's character, and immediately like the villain has to be like scarred or missing a limb or something in some way. So he definitely does just absolutely fall into that as well.
Because I was thinking about, Vader loses a hand.
Yep. You do have Scar from Scar. He does have his one scar over his eye.
Yeah, and then the way that Quasimodo is treated, he's obviously not the villain, but
because of his
his whole
othered.
plot is he's othered because of his quote unquote deformity.
Yeah, there was this article I found that kind of broke down that trope into like 3 different categories. So there are those who are resentful or jealous because of what's happened to them as far as like losing or missing limbs. They are born evil, and then that evilness manifests through physical differences like Vader, like Hook losing their hand, or they were born disabled and then become evil because of their treatment by society. And I thought that was really interesting. It didn't really cross my mind until doing some research for this episode, and then it got me thinking about how often that trope has or does come up, and we just like don't really bat an eye. How we can just be like, yeah, that guy was a villain because he is different than everyone else, and how ableist that is.
Yep. Yeah, it's the
same
that's
thing. Why I like.
Go ahead.
That's why I like in Luca when the dad is also missing a hand, and he's sort of seen as this like brooding, angry, almost like a villainous type of man, and then you actually
he's scary.
See that he's like
Quote,
scary,
unquote.
but then he's actually like the softest person. He's just got the outer shell of like a very hard, scary man, and that he's actually like really loving and kind. And I think Luca tried to kind of flip that trope on its head a little bit, which I liked.
Yeah.
Well, Abelle, can you talk a little bit more about like the queer coding of Captain Hook in your opinion? And I know it's not as black and white as being like a good thing or a bad thing.
What are kind of the pros and cons to having queer coded characters?
Yeah.
Specifically queer coded villains, I guess.
Yeah. So I think like it really comes back to where the origins of even just queer coding comes from. And it really started showing up in American cinema in about the 1930s when the Hays Code was enacted. And this was basically, it was the predecessor of the MPAA, to which today gives us like film ratings like PG, PG-13, whatever. But the Hays Code basically was like just a blanket censorship bill, basically, that said, you can only show certain things in movies, you can only show certain things certain ways. And for example, it banned profanity, it It banned lewd acts, whatever that might be interpreted to be, and it for sure banned any type of queer person at all or potentially queer relationship unless that person was depicted as like bad. And if they were depicted as bad, then something had to happen to them to punish them. So if you wanted to have a queer character in film, you could only have them be like an obviously bad person, and they had to be punished for being a bad person. And so if that's the only way you could have a queer person in your movie was to just like hint at subtext and probably have them as a villain, then that's how you had them in media. And eventually the Hays Code kind of filtered out of use in about the 1960s, I believe, and then we have the rating systems we have today. But obviously the effects for that hung around for a while because, like, that's just what the norm was. And it's one of those things where, you know, like, where you talk about representation being important, if the only way you can see yourself is in, like, the villains in media, you know, what is that going to make a little kid feel if they see someone that they identify with and the only people that they identify with on TV or in film is like a bad guy or a villain? Like, you know, what does that do to you as like a developing child, or even just as an adult? Even I still have times where I see myself represented in media and I'm like, oh, that is like really significantly emotional to me for whatever reason. So, you know, on the one hand, that really sucks when that's like your only available representation is to see yourself as the bad guy like time and time and time again. And then on the other hand, there's a way to like embrace it and just be like, well, if this is what you think of me, okay, sure. I'm just going to be a fucking fabulous villain and like have a great time being like a baddie for Halloween every time I get to dress up in something like that. Because, you know, like a lot of the most iconic Disney villains are pretty heavily queer-coded. Like Scar and Jafar are all queer-coded in a lot of ways. Jafar was actually, I cannot recall his name now, but he was actually created by an openly gay man. But, you know, again, like kind of flamboyant, effeminate male characters who definitely get what was coming to them. And again, these happened like these movies came out well after the Hays Code was ended. So even if it wasn't still like on the books, you still see like for years and years and years how long it took to get any kind of queer text and not just subtext anywhere that was at all okay.
That I had no idea. So first of all, thank you for educating all of us on that, because I think it's a question that's come up for me in HB a lot is like, why are so many villains specifically queer coded or coded in these kinds of ways? But then, yeah, but
it
as
was
you were
literally
talking,
the only way you could show them.
yeah,
that was
but then, as you were talking, two characters came to mind as far as like being queer coded, or and they were Namari from Raya and the Last Dragon, because they have like the shaved side of the head and they're very like muscular and brutal. Yeah. And Elsa, who, you know, in the end ends up being like a good person or whatever, but at first is seen as a villain. Namari is the antagonist and is trying to steal Raya's, you know, stones or pieces or whatever. While both of them are redeemed, I guess my question and the thought that I'm having a really hard time formulating is something around how like we assume that they're queer coded, and is it because in Elsa's case, is it because she doesn't have a love interest? Like, I don't know why, and I think I ranted about this in our Frozen episode. It irks me when we have a strong female protagonist, and just because they don't have a male love interest or a love interest of any kind, people are like, they gotta be, they're bi, they're a lesbian, they're, you know. And I'm like, why do we do that? But then with Namari being opposed to Raya, who, you know, has like longer hair and definitely quote unquote acts more feminine, are we queer coding her? Are we perceiving her as being queer coded because she is juxtaposed with Raya, or because of her character design, or like what is up with that?
Yeah, I
think it's like a combination. The residual effects of that the what you were just talking about, and also that if someone sees themselves and feels represented by that, that's okay too, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think a lot of it too is that like people are still so desperately looking for representation, and especially confirmed representation, because yeah, we can say like we like our gaydar is going off because this character is designed a certain way or behaves a certain way, or even if just they don't have a love interest. But like also it's 2024 and we still haven't had a canonically queer Disney protagonist. There has not been an actual gay Disney hero or heroine yet. So I think a lot of it is people like looking for that and hoping that it's there, and like taking these hints that they see that maybe could be someone saying, hey, I'm the character designer and I designed this character as queer. And maybe it's people just reading into things that they want to see. But I think it is just rooted in like a desire for confirmed representation and seeing like, oh yeah, I'm not imagining things. This is what I'm actually seeing.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. The two thoughts that came to mind for me were in Strange World, technically, I don't know that he is a protagonist, but the I'm already forgetting their names.
I forget all of their names.
So there's the dad, the son, and then that guy's son. That guy, that kid, the child is he has a boyfriend. But the boyfriend does not join them on the adventures. I think this was like a note HB and I had was that felt like the closest we got to someone in the spotlight being confirmed as yeah, like you were saying. And then the other one that came to mind was Katara and Asami from Legend of Korra. And it was so blatantly obvious in the final episode, and the creators have since come forward and they're like, oh yeah, they're running around the spirit world together and they're in love, and I think they've mentioned that like Nickelodeon at the time was like not about it. Couldn't do it.
They had to fight so hard just for a handhold in the final episode because people were like, no, we can't do that. And so they had to like drop hints the entire season so that by the very end Nickelodeon would be like, okay, I guess you can do this. But they had to fight for it.
Yeah, because I think in the comics they are in an open or not open relationship, but like outward they are in a relationship and people are aware of it and it's very obvious. But yeah, you're right. I don't know, because every time I think or I see or I hear people getting upset, like there's that couple in Finding Dory, there's the two moms and their stroller, and I remember there being a whole kerfuffle about that. There's the kiss in Lightyear that like, well, I don't
Disney executives are blaming that kiss for Lightyear doing poorly at the box office.
Yup.
See, and that's the other thing about representation is, and I'm sure we could all go off on this, is like they'll do a thing, and if something doesn't go well, they're like, see, well, this is why we can't include it because it doesn't do well. I'm thinking of like how long it took for us to get just Asian representation in anything, Anyway.
Well, and also connected to Lightyear. So I think that the character of Riley in Inside Out is very queer coded. Have you seen Inside Out 2 yet?
Not
Abelle?
yet, no.
Okay, I won't say anything. I was gonna go off of your point. Yeah.
Yeah, because like basically the premise of Inside Out 2, Riley is really idolizing she is about to start high school and she's idolizing a classmate who is older than her. Gotcha. Which does happen. We do idolize people, but hers is like bordering on crush / obsession. And Pixar and this is just stuff I've been seeing on the internet. I don't know how true any of this is, but I've been seeing a lot of discourse about how Pixar kept trying to get the creators to make the movie less gay.
I did see something about that recently.
They were refusing, and pretty much most of the creators that refused to back down have now been let go from Pixar because of that.
Yep. Yeah.
The only thing I'm going to say on that is, because I have a little bit of an inside scoop, the company just had to do like blanket layoffs to save money, because a lot of Pixar movies haven't been doing well, you know,
Right.
since Lightyear or even since before that. So not to say that they were targeted or that they were or weren't targeted, but just that perhaps during those layoffs that might have stoked some things and
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, thank
But
you
also,
for sharing
like,
that.
yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I don't know, my thought is like, and it's probably because I am lucky enough now to be in such inclusive and open-minded spaces. And I wasn't before. I think Abelle, you and I have talked about this at length in our Hunchback of Notre Dame episode about our
Yes.
conservative upbringing. But now I'm just at this point of like, why? And I'm going to add a lot of asterisks and over clarify what I'm about to say. But like, why is it such a big deal? Like, on one hand, I get why it has to be a big deal because there are so many people who still live in secret and don't feel seen, heard, acknowledged, accepted, loved, believed, you know, whatever. They don't have that representation. And then on the other, it's like, just
Yeah.
let it be a thing. Like, just let it get.
These
And
people
I think
exist. That's the thing. Is it like
yes.
we exist, always will, always have, you know, and the problem is that the like more conservative people are always talking about the quote unquote woke media, and it's like, no, we're just trying to show what
No.
Or
like,
pushing an
any
agenda.
yeah, and it's like, no, this is just the human experience. You just aren't part of that subset of it. Like,
Yeah.
Right.
It's literally just like people who, like, I heard a lot growing up when homophobia was much more still in vogue societally. Like, I heard people say, you know, oh, well, I don't care if people are gay just so long as they don't rub it in my face. But what they mean by rub it in my face is mean I have to acknowledge it at all, that it
To
exists.
see it.
And that's
Yeah.
what it feels like at the people who complain about woke media or whatever now. It's like, it's just that more people are telling like their own stories and stories about wider types of people. And if you don't want to see that, that's fine. No one's making you observe or consume any media like that. So go find whatever the hell else you want to watch.
But also, like, if it doesn't apply to you, move on.
Yeah,
I think
like-
we live in such a generation that just has to react to everything. If it like and center themselves, like, oh, I don't relate to this, and you should be
Like,
doing more to
okay.
make it relatable for me and my specific life. And it's like, okay, but what about the people that it is for? You know, and now that you've mentioned this Hays Code, like how hard people have had to fight for that representation and make it relatable to their not make it but you know have it relatable to their experience. Like, how do you think they feel when they're in the minority, when they're in the quote unquote other group, you know, and you're part of the majority where you could watch 99 films and they would all be targeted toward you, and it takes however many for someone else to find representation. Like,
Yep.
yeah. I had to talk to my therapist about not fighting with strangers on the internet when it comes to Agatha all along. Because
no.
I haven't seen anything yet, but I've heard that it's being called like the gayest Marvel show or something.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
even before that was the discourse about it. Like the posters were being put out. Marvel has been doing tons of marketing for it. They've been doing a lot of like they spent either they did it intentionally or not intentionally and then made it look like it was intentional, but they changed the title of the show every time they posted about it. So they would call it like Agatha and the Darkhold, Agatha and the Witch's Road, Agatha and this. And so every time they posted about it for the last 2 years, it's been called something different. And I remember sending memes to my friend or like sending the things to my friend and be like, what is this show gonna be called? Like, make up your mind. And then they were like, it's called Agatha all along, and it's been Agatha all along. That was like changing the title of the show, which I think is very clever.
Delightful.
That's clever. That's great marketing.
I think it's great marketing too, but like on all of the posts that Marvel does for Agatha all along, there are so many comments about how nobody asked for the show. Nobody's going to watch this show. Did it like so many people saying such negative things about it, and then I see equally in the comments there are people like, I asked for this show. Okay.
Yeah.
This show is for me. Like, it's just like, And so, yeah, I kind of had to be like, I'm not going to get mad at strangers on the internet when they comment hateful things on the Agatha All Along posts. I'm not going to get mad. Like, I'm just calming myself down because it's so true. Like this show, and honestly, I will be very mad if it's just queer baity and
Yes.
Ooh,
women do if women do not make out with each other in this show, I'm gonna be so pissed, Marvel.
See, this is why, case in point, I watch like no other Marvel stuff at this point. I will be watching Agatha All Along at some point because that show was made for me, if any of the Marvel stuff was. I have also
Yes.
heard it's the queerest Disney show that has been made yet. I'm
Mm.
waiting to get more feedback on that, but at the
Yeah.
very least, I am here for Catherine Hahn and spooky vibes. So,
Yes.
And Audrey
The-
Plaza, like, come
yes.
on.
yeah.
The cast is so good.
Mm-hmm.
I follow this creator called the Gay Comic Book Geek, I think is his name.
Mm-hmm.
And he does a lot, basically exactly what we're talking about on this episode. He does a lot of videos about things that are queer baity or things that say that they're gay, but the characters never actually touch each other, that kind of thing. And so he made a video about Agatha All Along specifically and being like, we'll see. Like Aubrey Plaza literally posted it's the gayest thing and that's what she signed up for, but like we will see.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I feel like we've gone on such a big tangent, but I think it's an important tangent to go on. So we might as well just call this episode like our queer episode or whatever. But how can I circle us back to Hook, to Captain Hook?
To bring it back to Hook, a question that we have talked a lot about with villains so far is like redemption or change.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard for me to address that topic, so I'm going to throw that at you, but mainly because I no longer see Hook as like this really evil bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
And other than capturing and kidnapping Tiger Lily and treating
Yes.
her grossly, he doesn't actively harm anyone. So my question for you is, do you see potential for redemption? Or if not, what would need to be done for him to have a redemption arc?
I feel like maybe so long as Captain Hook didn't actually get eaten by that crocodile, he just literally needs to go to therapy for a little while and unpack why he is so mad at this child. I mean, he's mad at the child for cutting off his hand and feeding it to a crocodile.
Yeah.
But maybe address why he's still just vibing out in Neverland. Maybe address the fact why is your enemy
why doesn't he leave?
a child? Why are you there? Your ship can presumably sail somewhere else. Maybe it can fly. I don't know. It's magic. But maybe just work with someone to understand why is your arch nemesis a literal child. There's something going on there you gotta unpack, dude.
Two questions that came up. I'm getting a lot of thoughts as you're talking.
Yes.
And they're always in twos. The first question is, how did he get there in the first place? Why is he there? Why is he there in the first place?
That's a good question. I don't know if it's addressed in the movie at all, at least that I can recall. I think it's just he's there because there's supposed to be pirates there. No.
The dark theory that I fell into the rabbit hole of is that Captain Hook is a former lost boy who escaped from Peter's clutches and returned to fight against him.
Huh.
That is a dark fan theory because Peter Pan is out here killing boys who decide to get older.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Interesting.
And
yeah, I am firmly in camp Peter is the villain at this point.
Okay. Yeah, I was just gonna say.
These are just fan theories. I'm just
But
saying.
they hold up. Like there is
Yeah.
enough evidence, you know? Like it's one thing for something to be like a head canon, but I feel like we have enough evidence between the original source material, the various adaptations that have come out. Peter Pan sucks.
Yeah. So yeah, the dark theory is that Captain Hook is a former lost boy. And I think that adds so much to the motivation as to why he wants to kill Peter Pan. He's like he's avenging all of the other lost boys. Like perhaps Captain Hook's friends were killed by Peter Pan and he's come back to, again, it's revenge based, but I don't know. That's the dark headcanon. That's the dark theory. I'll put a
It
link
feels,
to it in
is
the
it
show
is it
notes.
revenge or is it avenge? Like, is he avenging?
Yeah, like all of his friends are dead, maybe, except for like the ones he convinced to come
Yeah,
be
he
his
was the only
crew.
one that got away, you
Yep.
know?
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or maybe he's stuck there. Like maybe Neverland is this place that you can't actually leave. Uh
Maybe
like
because we never see an adult fly. It's only the kids
yeah.
we ever see fly with the fairy dust in the movie. I don't know why it wouldn't work on adults,
Mm.
but we never see it at least.
Like yeah, maybe he's stuck there. Maybe he can't leave and that's what he's forced to live his life. And the thing that's another theme of it, and this is like kind of a tangent, but the other theme of it is that like Captain Hook is not immortal. Like I think Peter Pan is
Mm-mm.
immortal in Neverland. Captain
Because of
Hook,
the magic.
Excuse
Bless
me.
you.
Thank you.
right, because of the magic. So Captain Hook is aging and will eventually die. And that's like part of the theme
Huh.
of the ticking clock. It's like it's a
Oh,
reminder to
Like his
him that
time is
yeah.
running out.
Yeah, and Peter
Mm.
Pan is never going to age, but you, sir, are going to die.
Like, do
Probably by
you
Yeah.
this
want to
crocodile.
waste
Like,
whatever
and
time you have left chasing this thing that's not gonna,
and
this
death
person that's not gonna die?
and it's like death is literally always coming for him because I forgot there's the whole thing with like the crocodile keeps coming for him because it got a taste of him and it just wants more, so it just constantly follows him and he can constantly hear the ticking clock that it swallowed.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
He's also got that like reminder, that
The
mortality
crocodile is
reminder.
mortality.
Yes, the crocodile is mortality.
I didn't realize this movie was so existential.
Apparently.
Hmm.
They kind
I
of
mean,
they go harder on that in Hook because they can just be a little more deeper because it's not just a kids movie, it's like, a Steven Spielberg movie.
yeah, it's a live action.
Yes. And they definitely do deal with like some attachment issues and some family bonding issues and like
Mm.
when your parents are maybe kind of shitty. How do you deal with that?
Interesting. Another
But
thought I just had was, what if there is a message or something around like trying to kill off your childhood or your past or
mm-hmm.
something around there? Like, I don't know. And this might be because I'm kind of going through this in my therapy journey right now, is addressing who I used to be, because I was also kind of a shithead. Like at home, perfect little angel daughter because I had to be, otherwise I would be brutally punished. But then at school, I talked about this in another episode, but like I bullied someone. I would feed into whatever rumors were being spread about other girls. And I mean, I was also just like a pick me. So anyway, all that to say, there's a big part of my past self that I wish like didn't existed. And I wish that I didn't remember all of these things. And as I'm getting older, it like still haunts me. And so there are a lot of, in that regard, I relate to Hook a lot as far as like kind of always being in an existential crisis and like, I don't know, having to deal with like past, present, future, and time, and all that fun stuff. HB though, I had a question. I had two questions for you, or two thoughts. The first being, we don't see any adults flying, but in the sequel, the animated sequel, when Peter Pan, or when Wendy's daughter ends up in Neverland, and then her whole thing is that she doesn't believe in Peter Pan. She doesn't believe in Tinkerbell. Tinkerbell almost dies because she doesn't believe, and then she like believes, takes her back, and he meets Wendy again, and he's like, "Come on, like come back to Neverland." And so he like tries to sprinkle fairy dust on her, and she starts floating. But I think the idea there is that it requires more magic on adults because they're too old or whatever.
They've lost their sense of wonder.
Yeah.
Because what is it? It takes faith, trust, and pixie dust. So maybe people who can't fly just don't have that faith and trust anymore.
Yeah, because it's harder for us to suspend disbelief in things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
or me
Well,
anyway. I shouldn't speak for all of us.
Well, I was thinking of the theme of Hook too, specifically the movie, the live action, like making it about Peter Pan deciding to grow up and then him having to go back and revisit his childhood. I think, correct me if I'm wrong because I haven't seen it in a while, but the theme of that is like it's about reconnecting to your childlike wonder where you don't have to necessarily become who you were again, because Peter Pan was not a good person, but was not a good child.
No.
But also just like, you know, opening yourself back up to that sense of wonder and whimsy, right? So it's like you don't have to kill your childhood. You can connect with it from a different place, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's what a lot of inner child healing is. Like there's this, at least when I was growing up, when we were growing up, there was this idea that like once you turn 18, you have to get so serious, you have to focus on your career and retiring and all these really big adult things, and there's no room for fun, there's no room for excitement and wonder and happiness, really, it sounded like, until you retire, until you're done, until you're almost dead, you know. And that's a really depressing thought, but I like to think that our generation is very vocal about like you can do both. Like you can reconnect to all the things that brought you a lot of joy in childhood, right? Like I think video games are a great way to do that, rewatching childhood favorite movies, even if they're animated or otherwise. So it's not all or nothing. And I think that's the other thing, is these movies promote a message that it's very black and white, very all or nothing. Like either you are a child, or you are like a child with all of the wonder, magic, and whimsy, or you are a bitter adult that just hates happiness and fun and childhood.
Yeah.
My second thought was when we recorded the What Makes a Villain episode with Julia and Becca mentioned something about how the dad, Mr. Darling, is the same voice actor as Captain Hook. Is that true?
I'm pretty positive it is. I couldn't tell you the cast member off the top of my head, but literally when I was watching it earlier today, I was like, those sound like the exact same voice. They're also similarly designed as well, because they have like the same coloring, the same, like they have similar facial hair and the same like color palette. They both have like dark hair and dark eyes. But yeah, so like definitely, I think that just kind of speaks to like, at least in the animated movie, like the father is clearly like the enforcer of the parents. He's like the hard ass who's like telling them to stop having fun and everything. And then that's basically the same thing that Captain Hook is doing in Neverland. He wants the Lost Boys to stop having their fun, which for him is cutting off his limbs and throwing them to reptiles.
But
apparently.
also like they are a menace to society. Like they're not just having silly, goofy, fun times. They're terrorizing people and chopping off their appendages and feeding it to crocodiles.
And like another thing I did not remember until watching the movie again today was that the Lost Boys, their house is in a hanging tree, which is a tree with a noose hanging from it. Like
what?
Where someone would be hung.
Okay, that
did
just
not
adds,
remember that.
Why?
That
Why
just
are the
adds
children
more
there? What's happening?
Yeah. See, okay,
what the hell?
That to me just adds more to the. I like this fan theory about Peter Pan just like killing these boys, and Hook is trying to save everyone, but it's a cult. It's a freaking cult.
It's actually a cult. Peter Pan is a cult leader. We have determined.
He's a cult leader. If you take anything away from this episode, it is that Peter Pan is cool. Nothing about the history about queer coding and how they could only be villains and be punished. No.
No, Peter Pan's
a fucking cult leader. That's it. We can end the episode there.
Okay, I do have a question before we end the episode. So we talked a little bit about Captain Hook's ending, and I think we've determined we don't really think he's a villain. But something we've been talking about on theme with the Disney villains is their ending. He doesn't die, but maybe he does. Like, they don't show him dying, but like, does he deserve the ending that he got? Does it feel like a justifiable ending for him? What more would we want to see? What different would we want to see?
I think by the laws of the movie, he's getting a justified ending. I definitely think he dies off screen because, like, he was running in front of a crocodile in front of the water, so I think, he definitely does not make it. I personally would like to see him go to some therapy and then a long vacation, Get him out of Neverland. Just get him out of Neverland. Him and Smee both. They can go on a nice beach vacation somewhere. Maybe go
Speaking
to
of
couples therapy. It'll be great.
So speaking of Smee, another question that we bring up a lot with villains is their relationship. Like what are their relationships to other characters and how does that reflect their mental state? And I cannot remember for the life of me how he treats Smee because from what I do remember, like Smee is, shaving his beard and is like taking care of him. But I don't ever remember, and this being recorded on the heels of us recording Yzma, she was very rude to Kronk and like calling him an idiot and a monkey and all of these things. But I don't remember Hook treating anyone poorly other than like you are my subordinate. I am your captain.
Yeah,
right?
he's not like nice to him. He's definitely a jerk to Smee a lot of the time. Like it's clearly not an equal relationship. Yeah, he definitely is like you are my subordinate. But yeah, but they do have like an interesting relationship just in terms of like you mentioned Smee shaving his face. Like Smee and Hook are very physically touchy with each other because like Smee also like washes his feet at some point or like puts him in like he puts his feet in a hot bath after he's fallen in water or something. He like helps him get dressed and all of that, and in general just like rests hands on him like much more than you see any like heterosexual male characters usually touch each other, even knowing that Smee is like his manservant basically. He's also like his butler and his personal caregiver, and like I mean he literally touches his face and shaves his face however often that needs to happen.
Yeah, it felt very intimate.
Yeah, they have it's a subordinate master relationship, but also like it is very intimate in a way that's not just like captain and first mate or whatever.
Yeah,
it's definitely their relationship is definitely also queer coded as well, which again I was gonna like, here's another villain who is quote unquote gay, maybe.
Yeah, I was gonna make a joke about like I don't know, HR getting involved because it seems like a very not great workplace relationship.
Yeah, they need some couples therapy. They both need some separate therapy. Maybe probably Smee needs another job.
I think so. I think it's not healthy for them to continue their romantic relationship while Smee is his subordinate. I think, yeah. Do you have any thoughts, notes before I ask my last question, HB or Abelle? Okay, my question is, one of the questions we've been asking throughout the season is if you have someone in your life who represents this villain or if you identify with them. Do you have any like words of encouragement, thoughts, opinions, feels about navigating that?
If you identify with Captain Hook, first of all, definitely question your choice in arch nemesis. Is this really... Maybe this is what his whole deal is. Maybe just look at where you're putting your time and your energy and ask if that's maybe the best choice for you. Maybe you want to do it, but do you need to do it? Is it healthy for you? Is it good for you?
And is it going to bring the satisfaction that you think it's going to heal and move on?
And is that going to be like a brief, short-term vindication type of thing, or is it actually a healthy long-term thing? Both can have their places, but just maybe be honest with whereabout you're choosing.
I think that's a great answer.
Yeah. I don't know, and I'm trying to think like what would be a situation or relationship in which someone might have a Captain Hook in their life?
Well, I mean, I was thinking vice versa. I was thinking like if you have a Peter Pan in your life, which is like a child who is annoying. And I was thinking like unfortunately there are a lot of younger people out there who are not great. And you have to, if it's someone who you interact with, like say you're a teacher or like I am a babysitter or where you have to interact with kids who don't treat you well, you have to figure out, like you are the adult. So you have to figure out how to manage the situation in a healthy way. Because like there was a point a couple years ago where the little girl I babysit and I would just not see eye to eye. And we fought so badly, and it's because she just wanted to be, it's the opposite of Peter Pan, but she just wanted to be an adult so bad. She wanted to be independent. She wanted me to leave her alone, and I'm like, no, I still have to walk you here and I have to do this for you and all of that. And it got to the point where her mom had to intervene, and her mom basically like let herself become the villain and was like, listen, if you and my daughter are disagreeing about something, just tell her that I said so. Like and she was like, so anytime Heather says something, it's because I said so. Like her mom. And she was like, and if she has a problem with it, she can take it up with me so that you guys aren't the ones fighting about it. And I was like, thank you, because it was a nightmare arguing with her and over the stupidest things too, right? And so it's like, I think you just have to figure out how to navigate those situations, because I also have a friend who like works at a camp, and over the summer she had like a nightmare of a time dealing with the kids at the camp. And so it's like, you know, there are times where you have to swallow your pride and just be like, okay, I'm the adult in this situation. I can't react like how I want to react. You know?
Yeah.
Like, I think a lot of it too is, like you're saying, pick your battles. Like, is this child really worth the stress and and if it's your own child, it absolutely is worth the stress. That's not what we're saying.
No.
Because my mom would say things like that. Anyway, but yeah, just pick your battles. And on the subject of like reacting to people online, like, why? You know, is it really serving you at the end of the day? Is it serving you to react to every comment you disagree with, or engaging in those kinds of conversations? Is it worth, in Hook's case, like you said, well, okay, at face value, is it worth for him to be chasing this child to get revenge? Probably not. Is it avenging? I would support this. A little different, little nuance there. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, if you identify with Hook, allowing some self-awareness, even if it's uncomfortable, recognizing that you also might not be the villain in this situation, and it could be that you are just not reacting and responding in a very healthy manner. And if there is a Hook in your life that maybe is a buzzkill and has to kind of react to everything you're doing, creating space, ignoring them, not letting their ideas or perceptions of how you should or what things should or shouldn't be negatively impact you in your life, unless you are being a little shit. Anyway, a lot of nuance in this episode. HB, you had compiled a list of all of the different adaptations of Hook and Peter Pan.
Oh, well, I was thinking now, like, I don't know where I don't know that it needs to be included, but I can say it. So the book, as I mentioned, was written. So I have it was originally a play from 1904. Then it was adapted into a novel by the same author / playwright, Peter and Wendy, in 1911. And then that play was published in 1928. And then there have been tons of other publications since then, including the Peter and the Starcatcher series that was released in 2004.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, all of that. There's so much. But if we go into also many stage productions, there's a Peter Pan stage production, Neverland, all sorts of great stuff. But then when we get to movies, we have Hook, 1991. We have a Peter Pan movie that was in 2003, which was a live action adaptation. We have Neverland also in 2003, the movie Pan in 2015, Wendy, which is a 2020 live action.
I did not watch that, but I heard about it.
I know nothing about this movie. The Wikipedia page is doing nothing for me. So then we had Come Away, which I don't think I know of.
That sounds so familiar.
It's a film that portrays Peter Pan as the brother of Alice from Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, which I think is interesting. And then we have the live action adaptation called Peter Pan and Wendy that just came out in 2023. I also have not seen that. No. And apparently there is an upcoming movie that is a horror film called Peter Pan's Neverland Nightmare. And
and I bet it's just a bunch of lost boys trying to escape. That's the horror.
Listen, please. It's by the same people who did the Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey movie, which I never saw. But
no.
So I don't know.
No,
I don't know
thank you.
I don't know what it's about.
That was not my particular jam, as it were.
Yeah.
I didn't see it.
I haven't seen any of those. None of those that I listed I have ever seen, except for Hook and Peter Pan. Because there are so many of them. And then of course we have like the kids TV shows like Jake and the Neverland Pirates. There's so much.
Cool.
Mhm.
Yeah, what a legacy. But also,
Truly.
what legacy has Peter Pan left behind? You know, or people
Truly.
think he's the hero? No. No.
Peter Pan is not a hero. He's a
He's a cult
of the
leader.
No. No, and I
Y'all
totally
are
forgot
all
too.
drinking the Kool-Aid.
I totally forgot too. The reason he brings Wendy to Neverland is because he wants her to be a mother to the Lost
Yes!
Boys. Like
that's what we were saying in our
That's why
episode.
he wants to bring her. I was like,
It's fucked
I
up.
forgot this shit.
He sucks.
Right?
He sucks.
He sucks.
Anyway, Team Hook. We shouldn't have even included him in our villains season
No.
because he's not the villain.
He was
He's
wronged.
not.
He was framed.
I think we needed to include him to get here.
This is true.
This is
This
true.
is true. This is true. I
Mhm.
support that. Anyway, well, thank you so much, Abelle, for being here again. I
Yeah.
love these conversations. I always learn so much. If you haven't listened to our Hunchback of Notre Dame episode, definitely check that out for the history of the Romani people and the slur that we just kind of throw, or that the movie threw around. And I still hear
Yeah.
sometimes
Mhm.
in a song, like the song I hear on the radio, and I'm like,
Mhm.
what are we talking about? Didn't we talk about this? Like, we shouldn't be saying that.
Yeah.
But can you tell the people, where to find you, maybe what projects you're working on, or
Yeah, I am on Instagram at actually Abelle, Abelle. You can also find me on. I'm only calling it Twitter. That's the only name it will ever have to me, at Abelle Prince VO. I currently actually have, after we finish recording this, I have to go record a couple of auditions to send for a callback to a thing and some other stuff. But yeah, that's about it for me right now.
yay! How exciting.
That's exciting.
Yeah, and thank you guys again for having me. I also always just love getting to talk more in depth about any of this stuff, and getting to nerd out with other nerds is always a good time.
Yeah.
So fun. So fun.
Super fun. Well, thanks for listening, everybody, and we'll catch you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Mental Health Multiverse. You can follow us on TikTok and Instagram at mhm.thepodcast.
And join our Patreon for as little as $3 for bonus and additional content.
You can follow both of us on Instagram and TikTok, HB at Heather Bodie.
And me, Marissa/LB at littleben_notbroken. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to share it with a friend.
Screenshot it and tag us on Instagram, or leave us a rating or review.
Thanks again, and we'll talk to you again soon.